Tape identification, Faster Than Light radio show to Brent Stone, recorded on the 17th of October. Identification.
Kalian makan saya.
The Faster Than Light radio show.
Hi, and welcome once again to the show. Thanks for joining us. First up, a correction from last week's show. Well, really an addenda to last week's show. There I was editing on the run, or there we were editing on the run, weren't we, Anna? And we didn't have time to give away the giveaway from last week's portion of Fantanimals. So I thought we'd do it at the very front end of this show before you even hear this week's edition of Fantanimals, which is superb, by the way, so stay listening. I thought we'd give away the material that went with the Donna Barr episode, which was last week's portion of Fantanimals. The giveaway is issue number 2 of Desert Peach, and the question for you to send in is, the series is about, that is the Desert Peach issues, are about a fictitious Fiersik Rommel, the Desert Peach. Now the question is, who was his more famous real-life brother? That is, who was the real-life Desert Peach, if you like? That is the one from the Second World War, if that's not enough heavy questioning and answering for you. If you know the answer to that, put the answer on the back of an envelope, along with your name and address, and send it to Fantanimals Giveaways, the Faster Than Light radio show, 6UVS FM, and the address is the University of Western Australia, Crawley 6008. That should get to us all. I've had a number of envelopes over the last couple of weeks for various giveaways from various programs. As I'm not repeating them, and as the mail seems to be so erratic at the moment for one reason or another, I'm sort of holding the giveaways, and what I'm figuring on doing is taking all the envelopes to all the different programs' giveaways the week after next, or it might even be the week after, seeing how episode number 6 pans out and edits down, and giving away all of them together. So if you can bear with that, last week's program, which was giveaway number 5 for the issue 2 of Desert Peach, the series, that is the series Desert Peach, Donna Barr's new issues, is about a fictitious Fiersik Rommel, the Desert Peach, who was his more famous real-life brother. Now, having gotten that giveaway out of the road, let me tell you that this week's giveaway, the one for program 6, is signed by the artist Stan Sakai, who we'll be talking to on this week's edition of Fantanimals. That follows in a little time. So a signed version of Usagi Yojimbo, and boy, there must be a lot of you out there who would actually really enjoy that. More of that anon. News that's come my way this week, and which I think you'd be interested in, some of it taken from the latest issue of Locus, concerns the new list of Pan books. Now, Pan paperbacks have been part of the scene here in Australia, well, as long as there have been Pan paperbacks in Great Britain. And originally, Pan was a triumvirate of publishers who didn't have mass market lists of their own, but who got together in order to make sure that some of their better titles could make their way onto the mass market shelves, that is newsagent shelves, in paperback form. Pan Books was broken up a couple of years ago, the lion's share and the name going to Macmillan, although the publishers that made up the original version of Pan withdrew many of their works and are now publishing their own mass market lists, such as Gallant's, for instance, which is now doing its own paperbacking, and we've talked about a number of their titles here on the show. Pan, because of its changes, and I think to keep pace with the fact that they are now an independent publisher tied in with Macmillan, have decided to repackage Pan Books in 1990. And the launch of the new line is April 1990 in the UK, which means about June or July we should see, that's of next year, we should see the new look Pan Books out here. There are going to be 3 areas and 3 logos on the spine that Pan will concentrate on: Pan Science Fiction, Pan Horror, and Pan Fantasy. The lists will be launched with 5 titles: Dragon Prince by Melanie Rawn, Jason Cosmo by Dan McGirt, First Flight by Chris Claremont, Dark Voices, which is a selection from the Pan Book of Horror Stories series, and a title yet to be chosen. After May 1990, Pan evidently intended to publish 2 titles a month, and the publicists in the UK are saying, but then by then we should have somebody really big, and they'll get a month all to themselves as a sort of kind of special. Future books that they've got planned include novels by Brian Stableford, Charles de Lint, and the new Asimov-Silverberg collaborations that we talked about some time ago here on the show. There will occasionally be a non-fiction entry, such as Douglas Winter's Faces of Fear, which is a collection of interviews with horror authors, and a book about Stephen King is planned as well. But of course, when you're talking about horror, you start talking about Stephen King. The person editing it is hoping that this will become a showcase, and the person doing the editing is Cathy Gale, for new name authors and particularly talented new British authors and writers in the fields of science fiction, fantasy and horror. I wish her well and look forward to seeing the new list when it finally comes our way. I'll be back in a moment with 1 or 2 things that have come our way already.
Paperback writers.
A couple of weeks ago, I was talking about and reviewing a book by Sharon McCrum called Bimbos of the Death Sun. And just so you all can get your pencils and papers out, I figured I might as well give away a copy of this that came my way courtesy of Penguins as well. When I reviewed the book, I said it had won a major award in the United States for mystery writers. The award's named after Edgar Allan Poe, and it is called what? That is the question. If you can answer the name of the award, write it on the back of an envelope. What is the award named after Edgar Allan Poe for mystery writers in the United States? Then a copy of Bimbos of the Death Sun may be coming your way if you're the one selected out of the bag. Don't let the title put you off if you miss the review. It is a very funny book and a very well-written book around a number of murders, or a number of disappearing bodies anyway, that happened during a science fiction convention. It's actually not said to be a science fiction convention, it's said to be a gaming convention, but it reminded me so much of all the science fiction conventions I've attended over the years that I actually sort of fell in love with Bimbos of the Death Sun. And besides that, it's a title that could get up everyone's back, if not up their nose, and yet it's actually a very enjoyable book. Published by Penguin and available for $8.99. Sharon McCrum has not written anything else in our genre area, and in fact, as this book has won major awards in the mystery writers area, I take it she doesn't see herself as a science fiction area writer at all. It's just she uses the science fictional landscape, that is the reality landscape of fans and fanzines and fanish conventions, as the background for this particular novel, Bimbos of the Death Sun. So catch up with it, and if you're interested in winning that copy of that book, the answer to the question, what is the name of the award, the Major Mystery Writers Award in the United States named after Edgar Allan Poe, put it on the back of an envelope along with your name and address, and mail in your envelopes to the Faster Than Light radio show, care of 6UVS FM. That's the University of Western Australia, Crawley 6008. One other item that's come my way that I've really enjoyed, it's a reissue under the Puffin Plus label, which is the list for teenagers from Penguins. It's a reissue of a 1976 work. It's had a number of reissues over the years by Ursula Le Guin. Now, 1976 in the career of Ursula Le Guin saw her at the end of her major writing in the area of science fiction. She had finished 18 months beforehand The Dispossessed. It won the major award, the Hugo, in 1975. It was the second Hugo award-winning novel that Ursula had after Left Hand of Darkness. And there were a number of other works through the early 1970s that really marked her out as a major science fictional author. So it seemed to me every book that came thereafter we looked at longing for Ursula to write more. But it didn't happen. Ursula's career changed direction, or she chose to change direction, and she's written different sorts of fiction, all of them speculative, but this is one I'd overlooked because it was a teenager novel. It's called A Very Long Way From Anywhere Else. It's about a relationship between a teenage boy at 17 who is your average high school scientific jerk/nerd. He's very introspective, he knows what he wants and what he wants to do, and yet inside his own intellect, he's captured in a very mundane life with parents that don't understand his ambitions and a high school system that can't really cope with him or meet his needs. That's not to say that he's outside the system, he's very much on the inside of it. He's like so many intellectual people in the school system, he underachieves, and therefore he manages to cope quite well indeed. Coming into his life is a young girl by the name of Natalie Field, She plays the violin, and she's very sure with her great power what she wants to do. She wants to compose contemporary music. These two, at a time in their life when you might say their gonads are running right and various substances are cruising around their bodies they're finding it hard to cope with, these two come together and they find a mutual relationship which is extremely satisfying, the way Ursula Le Guin writes it. This is a novel of transition, like so many novels written for teenagers, one that you could safely put in the hands of anyone in your household who I think is finding it hard to cope with the fact that they know how to think, and yet life seems to be running much faster than they're able to catch up with it in a social context, a very long way from anywhere else. It's a lovely piece of writing, about novella length for the adults in your family, and very, very much enjoyable. It struck me that maybe Ursula had taken a close look at many of the people she was meeting at science fiction conventions and decided to reach inside the mind of a male, which is because the book's written from Owen's perspective and it's in the first person, and a male of the sort that she saw so many of, spotty teenage boys at science fiction conventions, to try and work out how they would cope with life as it's really lived, and life of trying to use their intellect as well. It's a lovely piece of writing, and I'm sorry I've left it 10 years to read it, but you can catch up with it now, as I say, because Penguin are re-releasing it at $5.95. Well, it's time for Fantanimals, and this week, as I promised at the beginning of the program, Craig takes us on a journey to speak to probably the one he admires most out of the people he's talked to, Stan Sakai. Here's Craig.
Fantanimals, a miscellany of American independent cartoonists and comic books in the realm of science fiction and fantasy anthropomorphics. In this program, an anthropomorphic strip par excellence. It's become so popular that you may know of it even here in Australia, and deservedly so. I would venture to say, and some people may disagree, but I'm willing to stand by my choice, that Usagi Yojimbo is probably the finest comic strip story in production today. Usagi Yojimbo is the creation of one Stan Sakai, an experienced cartoonist living in the Los Angeles area. It's a Japanese samurai saga. Usagi Yojimbo means rabbit bodyguard. Miyamoto Usagi is a wandering masterless samurai, or ronin, and in his travels he encounters perils, meets and helps old and recent friends, and rights injustices, in accord with the ancient warrior's code of honor, Bushido. The art style could be described as very cartoony, particularly in Stan's depiction of the character animals themselves. Yet they don't lose any of their credibility for this so well as the job done. The backgrounds, the costumes and the accoutrements are masterly and authentic, the whole effect revelling in penwork that is tight, precise and crisp. There's nothing wasted on the page. Every scene, every frame, perhaps every line is there for a purpose. The composition or balance never misses. In terms of what a comic strip requires to give the proper sense of flow, this equates into a perfect sense of timing. Likewise with the storylines, they're tightly scripted, absorbing and satisfying. This alone would have been sufficient to make it a great comic, but Usagi Yojimbo goes further. It achieves a depth of characterization and a majesty of scope belied by the tongue-in-cheek humour of the individual stories. Each tale manages somehow to contribute more than the one before it, or, as I'd prefer to put it, Usagi Yojimbo started out flawless and then continued to get better. Stan Sakai is also a delightful man to meet. I recorded this interview in his home studio.
I was born in Kyoto, Japan in 1953, and when I was 2 years old, my family moved to Hawaii, where my father came from.
Mm-hmm.
I had lived in Hawaii for 23 years, and now I'm in the Los Angeles area.
Uh-huh. So you grew up in Hawaii with a Japanese background.
Right. We used to go to see the Japanese films almost every week.
Mm-hmm. The
Kurosawa, the Inagaki, and all the other Japanese chambara movies.
Mm. So you were a great fan of the Seven Samurai and that vein of film.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And what were your other influences when you grew up?
Well, in comic books, my biggest influence was Steve Ditko, the early Spider-Man
Right.
issues in the 60s. And currently, I'm a big fan of Sergio Aragones's, also a European artist called Milo Manara, whose work I really enjoy.
And Sergio Aragones is Gru,
He's the creator of Gru the Wanderer.
Gru the Wanderer.
And I do the lettering for Gru also.
So tell me about Usagi Yojimbo.
Well, he's a samurai bunny rabbit. His ears are tied up in a sort of Japanese top knot, which the samurais used to wear, which was a mark of the samurai class.
Right.
And he's a ronin, or a masterless samurai. And he goes around the 16th century, or 17th century Japan rather, having adventures. He meets up with villains, with monsters from Japanese folklore, and gets into scrapes with feudal lords and such.
He's a masterless samurai. What happened to his master?
His master, Lord Mifune, where did I get that name from?
Where did you get that name from?
I wonder. Well, from Toshiro Mifune, of course. His master, Lord Mifune, was killed in the Battle of Adachigahara, which was in my world, or Usagi's world, the great battle of Japan. And he was killed treacherously, actually. And since then, Usagi's been a wanderer.
Right. Without a master and righting wrongs. And living in poverty.
That kind of goes with wandering. Yeah.
So, yes. And who are some of the people that he's met?
Well, there's Lord Noriyuki, who is the lord of the Geishu clan. His chief retainer, Tomoe Ame, who is a cat. There's Gen the bounty hunter,
Who's a
rhino. He's kind of modeled after Toshiro Mifune's Yojimbo character, actually.
Okay.
Kind of a scruffy.
Is he a goodie or a baddie, or a bit of both?
He's a bit of both. He looks out for himself, actually, but he has a kind of like a good heart.
Right.
But he really tries to deny it. There's also Zatu Ino, the blind swords pig. And Zatu Ino was based upon a Japanese series called Zatu Ichi, the blind swordsman, except my character's a pig who kind of sees with his nose.
There's a serious thread that runs through your world, your Usagi universe.
Right. Usagi's kind of like tongue-in-cheek adventure. The stories can get serious, they can also get very humorous. I've met, well, Usagi's met Godzilla, or a type of Godzilla.
Yes. There have been some fairly long serials too, 6-7 chapters.
Right. The first 4 issues of his own series comprise one story, and I'm currently working on a 6-issue story right now. It's called the Dragon Bellow Conspiracy, and it reunites Usagi with almost all of his secondary characters, Tomoe, Lord Noriyuki, Gen, and Zatu Ino. But most of the stories have been single-issue stories.
On a similar line, but in a different universe, you've got another character, also a swordsman, or swords rabbit, by the name of Nilson Groundthumber.
Right, Nelson's a rabbit, and he travels around with his companion, Hermie, who we just discovered is a guinea pig.
But he has been, in the past, called a hamster,
A mole, a hamster pig.
But it's now settled.
It's a guinea pig. Whereas Usagi's adventures take place in Japan, Nilson's adventures take place in Europe, around, I'd say 15th or 16th century Europe.
What sorts of things happen to Nilson?
Well, Nilson is a completely humorous adventure series. There is some swords play, but almost no one ever gets killed. It's mostly jams that Hermie gets into that Nilson has to drag him out of it.
But although he's in Europe and Usagi's in Japan, I've occasionally seen the sneak guest appearance.
Right, they're always in the background of each other's stories.
By way of some kind of private joke.
Right.
And I also once saw in Usagi Yojimbo a guest appearance by Gru the Wanderer.
Correct, yeah. Actually, Gru has been in 2 issues.
Mm-hmm. That's Sergio's Aragona's character.
Well, Sergio and I are pretty good friends, so,
Mm-hmm.
and we've worked together for 10 years now.
Mm-hmm. That's a little bit representative of the particular style of humour that goes through Usagi. It's very sort of tongue-in-cheek humour.
Yeah, very much so.
The occasional belly laugh. But the serious thread of the code of Bushido.
Right.
Running through all of it.
Stan Sakai. Usagi Yojimbo appeared first in Albedo and Critters, then in a self-titled comic book of its own, which is published by Fantagraphics Books and is currently up to issue 16. Your best way of obtaining all the stories is to buy the compilation books in graphic novel format by Fantagraphics, titled Usagi Yojimbo, volumes 1 and 2 being available so far, with enough material having appeared since then to make a 3rd volume likely in the near future. By the time these compilation volumes hit the shelves in Australia, they're priced at well over the $20 mark, but take my advice, they're well worth the purchase. Well, in this, the second last program of the series, that's all the American comic book and artists I'll be covering. I hope you've enjoyed learning about them as much as I've enjoyed sharing them with you, and of course actually meeting the creators face to face. If what you've heard has aroused your interest in any of these publications, then I urge you to go out and track them down. And if you don't have any luck at the specialty comics or bookstores, or even if you want to learn more about them in general, then contact me, care of this station, and I'll give you whatever information you might need. Well, next week will be the gamer's treat. A final surprising twist at the conclusion of the Fantanimals saga, the Australian connection. See you then.
Oh, this is John Varley here in Western Australia. This is the Faster Than Light radio show, coming to you considerably slower than the speed of light. But some poetic license is allowed.
Yes, thanks to John Varley for that, and thanks to Craig too for Fantanimals. Another 2 programs ahead of you. In fact, there was only really one person ahead of you, and a Melburnian called Paul Kidd, who's been writing games, but I'll leave that story until next week. The interviews are so interesting and it's so long, we've cut it up over 2 weeks. That's ahead of you on the next 2 versions of 2 episodes of Fantanimals. This week's giveaway, that for Program 6, the great Stan Sakai. The prize is Usagi Yojimbo Book 2. It's the 2nd compilation album. It's signed by Stan Sakai himself, and the front page, there is an original illustration by Stan Sakai, so it's a prize well worth having. And there's a 2nd prize as well. There's Usagi Yojimbo issue number 16. That's a comic book. So the question to win these wonderful prizes, the 3rd giveaways on this week's version of the Faster Than Light radio show. Boy, we've got lots of good material. The question is, in Japanese, what does the word Usagi mean? A hint, it refers to the type of animal the main character is. So in Japanese, what does the word Usagi mean? And it refers to the type of animal that the main character is in Usagi Yojimbo. So your answer to that question on the back of an envelope along with your name and address, and post it off to the Program 6 of Fantanimals giveaway competition, the Faster Than Light radio show 6UVS FM here at the campus of Crawley 6008. Yes, well, the funny things one hears. To end up the program with, apart from giveaways and apart from all the other good things that are coming our way, I did receive over the last couple of weeks a copy of the Amazing Heroes preview for 1989. That's basically looking at the summer of comics that's ahead of us. Interestingly enough, it's Batman on the cover looking at the Spirit. It's drawn by Will Eisner. It's one great crime fighter looking at another. It made me think about what 1989 has been for Batman. It sold a lot of comics, the film, but the film has also raised a lot of queries in my mind about the notion and the nature of images of popular culture and the way in which they're transferred around the world. One of the most haunting images, I think, of this year was in the mop-up of the cyclone that went through the Caribbean, causing great havoc even before it got onto mainland United States. And looking at the island culture of people wandering around mopping up after the cyclone had been through. And they showed the slum areas of one of the particular islands, and there in the middle of the slum, in the middle of all this devastation, was a young boy wearing a baseball cap, an American baseball cap, with the Batman symbol on. And it struck me as being an example of the ubiquitous nature of Batman in 1989. I mean, there have been lots of other reminders, and I've mentioned them before here on the Faster Than Light radio show, of the Batman symbol in Perth before the film arrived. So Batman has been building up and has been greatly hyped. I did receive another reminder, this time in published form, and one you can track down in the new magazine 2020. 2020 has been launched by Time Out, which is an on-the-streets commentary on life in London. 2020 is a magazine looking at the arts, entertainment and culture in London, and much more besides, in the variety that Face used to before it got sort of hijacked into its own culture of style. 2020 takes a look at most of the areas many of you would be interested in: films, music, theatre, books, art and more besides. The 5th issue, which has made its way onto the newsstands, or is it the 4th? It's the 4th issue. It's dated July 89, which has been out there for a couple of weeks now, has Batman on the cover. A very beaten-up looking Batman after the plane has crashed. And inside, there's a rather exclusive and interesting interview with Tim Burton, which I've not seen elsewhere, so maybe the exclusive tag holds true. It's something that they have gone out of the way and done themselves. There's more in the issue besides Batman, but it is the 6 pages of Batman that I found most interesting. There are some stills here that I've not seen elsewhere. They're not in the Batman book. And there's also some production stills of Tim Burton standing around the Batcar and doing a bit of direction, which I've not seen elsewhere. The style of the writing, the person doing the writing is Simon Garfield, and he says, Batman versus Hollywood. Can the Cape Crusader survive the attack of the movie moguls? Well, when Tim Burton heard that his Batman script was the best Warner Brothers had ever seen, he should have known that he was in deep shit, writes Simon Garfield. Unfortunately, he didn't. Instead, he thought it was party time. After many months of confusion, Burton thought that this was why a man should dress up as a bat at night, because it pleased the Hollywood executives for him to do so. Batman was Tim Burton's first cash trial. At 26, he had directed Pee-wee's Big Adventure. At 28, Beetlejuice, small and medium budget sleepers that showed him to be a man of rough but frequently bejewelled talent. His 3rd movie wasn't one of those, not only because it would be the most hyped of the year, nor because it threatened to tamper with everyone's youth, but because it promised to end careers. Burton's career, several actors' careers, and most devastatingly, the careers of the studio people who had invested over $30 million in the fantasy. So when just a few weeks before shooting, the Hollywood Word said that the screenplay was perfect, it was to be a Pinewood day of delight. The artist could start being creative again. Burton said, "Great guys, thanks a lot." And then the Hollywood people looked at each other and looked at Burton and said in heavy tanned italics, "But it needs a little work." Yes, that's the feeling I had. They tampered with the story to the point where there was very little of it left indeed. There's much more. In fact, there is much, much more of Simon Garfield's writing, an interview with Tim Burton in the July 89 issue of 2020, and I'll leave you to find it at your local newsagents. There is, in fact, a good feel to 2020. It's a magazine that I'll be looking out for more of. I'd seen the previous issue, which had taken a look at the career of Malcolm McLaren, amongst other things, and to show the diversity, not only is there Batman in this issue, but there's a look at the new Aboriginal art coming out of Australia, written, as I say, from a British perspective. So all of that and more, as they tend to say elsewhere, in 2020 from Time Out. It's going to set you back about $5 odd at your local newsagent, but I think it's money well spent. And back to that amazing Heroes movie preview that highlighted Batman for the summer. It also highlights a number of other comics that are coming out and have come out now in the US of A and available at specialty stores here in town. Amongst them is an interesting group of 3D comics, and I aim to take a look at these on a show in the not-too-distant future. So that's ahead of us on the Faster Than Light radio show, and if I can borrow the phrase I've just used, all of that and more on next week's show. More of Fantanimals as we talk to a gamer, more of books, more of reviews, and a look at the large screen and what was on over the holidays and what we can expect in the next couple of months. Until next week, when once again I hope I have your ears. Bye for now. You've been listening to the Faster Than Light radio show, produced and recorded in the audio studios of Murdoch University, thanks Anna, for 6UVS FM.